Thank you for coming to today's lecture, KGRI lecture series. Now I'd like to introduce Professor Mart Susi from Estonia, Tallinn University. Professor Susi has initiated several European-level research networks exploring human rights in the digital domain and the matter of emergence of new human rights. He is the editor-in-chief of newly established East European Yearbook of Human Rights. And he is solo or co-editor of many academic books. One of these is Routledge Handbook on Human Rights and the Digital Society, which will be published next summer. I had honorably an opportunity to write one chapter in that book. This is the relationship between him and me. Today's theme is the Internet balancing formula. This formula is for balancing conflicting human rights online. So, please.
Good evening, esteemed colleagues. When Professor Yokodaido emailed me, I was sitting in the subway. I have never, and I thought, how should I start? And I think I could start, we all, probably all have seen this famous movie, Lost in Translation. So I thought what happened, yesterday we had very kindly, we had a lunch, and when the lunch was ending, we discussed when is today's lecture. Professor Yokodaido probably meant it will be at 16 and we will meet at 15:30. I heard it will be at 6 and we meet at 5:30. But I'm extremely grateful that you waited for me, and now I will go to the topic. Is it necessary for me to speak on the microphone? It is, yes, very good. So, I will introduce to you the concept of Internet balancing formula. It was first introduced in June 2017. There was a special seminar at the Research Directorate of the European Commission in Brussels. So it was introduced about 1.5 years ago, the idea of the formula. It was subsequently introduced at the scientific conference at Tallinn University in September, and it has been introduced at various universities in Europe, South America, and Australia. It is now the first time it is introduced here in Japan. It will be published, this article outlining the balancing formula will be published next year in this publication book, which already Professor Yokodaido mentioned. It will also appear in the special edition on Internet and human rights law at the European Law Journal in March 2019. The European Law Journal is the most important publication of international and human rights law in Europe. What is also significant? This European Law Journal special edition will include an article by Professor Robert Alexi, who is critically reviewing the Internet balancing formula, and then also my article, which will reply to Robert Alexi. Perhaps Robert Alexi's name does not require introduction here, but still I would say that Robert Alexi probably belongs into the 5 most important legal scholars of today. I would put him on the same foot as Dworkin and Habermas. Now, how to reach the Internet balancing formula? We know that all around the world, balancing is used as the discursive practice to balance conflicting rights online. For example, the freedom of expression against the right to privacy. We know that balancing conflicting rights is used by stakeholders. Here I mean big internet companies like Twitter, Yahoo, Google, Facebook. International courts apply that. We also know that the legislatures endorse it at United Nations level, at European Union level, and academics are a bit divided. But the fact that it is used, balancing as an approach is used, does not mean can be fully justified scientifically. Objections against balancing conflicting rights online are, first of all, the absence of morality. It is the objection that is used also against balancing offline. It is said that balancing is lacking moral element, and secondly, the element of arbitrariness. I will go more detail into that. Now, the epistemic aspect of balancing. This epistemic aspect is related to how information about conflicting rights is obtained, then how it is evaluated, and then how the outcome is implemented. In the other words, there are two principal positions whether balancing is justified for online companies. The first position claims that private companies, Google, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, should never be given the task to assess online content. For example, this position is supported and advanced by Frank LaRue, who was the first special rapporteur of United Nations on Internet. And he has issued a report about 5 years ago where he says that censorship measures should never be delegated to a private entity. No state should use or force intermediaries to undertake censorship on its behalf. The Council of Europe also has issued a recommendation on internet freedom and has said that state authorities should not impose an obligation on intermediaries to monitor content. The reasons for that position, which, if we look at the American side, the concept of safe haven, which you may be familiar with, safe haven means that the online company which provides a platform should not be asked to monitor the content. The reasons for that position are the following. First of all, political, because it is believed that if online companies start to look at the online content, they may influence public opinion. For example, the outcome of elections. It is economic argument. It is believed that big companies, if they monitor online content, it is very costly for them. They need to employ hundreds and thousands of employees. There is also the constitutional argument. The constitutional argument says that private companies do not have constitutional legitimacy to balance and evaluate and assess conflicting rights. These objections do not mount to rejection from the legal theory aspect because balancing is based on optimization requirements. What does it mean? It means that something should be realized to the greatest possible extent, given the legal and factual possibilities, and we can say that private balancing is such a novel legal and factual possibility. Now, the second position claims that internet intermediaries are well positioned to balance. As you can see, it is opposite to the view that companies like Google and Yahoo should not look at the online content. For example, the very famous Delphi judgment of the European Court of Human Rights, the Google judgment of the Court of Justice of the European Union, the new European Union Data Protection Regulation, they are all based on the assumption that private online companies are better positioned to balance conflicting information. Now, there are two specific questions related to internet and assessment on conflicting rights. First of all, how information is gathered, and the other, how information is assessed. The question how information is gathered is time-related. When a judge has to balance conflicting rights offline, somebody publishes a newspaper article and accuses a friend of indecent behavior or corruption. The judge has many years to gather information and reach the decision. Online, there is no such luxury, because effective balancing depends on very quick decision whether certain information is intrusion into privacy or not. Maybe you have seen there is a new documentary film recently which has been coming out called The Cleaners. This documentary shows how in Google headquarters sit hundreds and hundreds of administrators behind computer screens, and they have 1 minute, sometimes less than 1 minute, to decide whether to block information or delete information. So time is crucial. Secondly, we could say that the shortness of time can lead to the rejection of online balancing. But here, the idea of internet balancing formula becomes central, because it is a mathematical formula, which I will introduce in a second. The second aspect against online balancing is related to the matter of arbitrariness. We know Jürgen Habermas's very famous sentence. The sentence is directed not against balancing online, but against balancing offline. And this sentence says that there are no rational standards to use balancing as a method in judicial intervention into conflicting rights. Now, Robert Alexi, Professor Alexi, has entered a debate with Habermas and has said that his weight formula, which is applied offline, is providing this rational standard. Internet-specific aspect of arbitrariness is a lack of transparency. What do we mean? Transparency means, or lack of transparency means, if Facebook takes down your posting, or if YouTube takes down your video or your child's video, they do not publish reasons. They do not tell you reasons, because they have no time for that. That is the absence, or that is the element of lack of transparency. Now, the next epistemic question is, who is the decision maker, which are the standards, and what is the argumentation? In my view, it is related to the issue of capabilities. You know, very famous American legal scholar Martha Nussbaum has initiated the doctrine of capabilities, what somebody is able to do. My question of capabilities is, are online intermediaries capable of issuing individualized decisions when they decide whether to take down your child's video or not? What online companies do, they publish statistics and they publish certain general standards. For example, the right to be forgotten, which now is applied by Google and other search engines, what do? They receive hundreds of thousands of requests every month. They do not publish individualized decisions, they publish statistics. How many requests to block information have been granted, how many not, and they publish certain general standards. The internet balancing formula as a mathematical tool can overcome this matter. Now, there is the ontic dimension as well, and then I will go on to introducing the formula. The status quo question is, are the rights to be balanced of equal value? We know that there is a statement, and there seems to be a kind of academic consensus that rights online are the same as offline. For example, the general comment to ICCPR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, says issued by Michael O'Flaherty, the current General Director of European Fundamental Rights Agency, says the same rights which people have offline, they should also have online. There are other courts which apply the same thing. There are contestations to this statement that rights online and offline are the same from both sides. Some say that freedom of expression deserves more protection. Others say that right to privacy deserves more protection online. And the ontic dimension is then related to the matter whether, if we start to look at balancing conflicting rights online, the initial position that their weight is the same is true or not, whether it is correct or not. I will send to Professor Yakodaido these slides so they can be disseminated. Now, there is also the matter of internet vulnerability, a new concept which has emerged in European academic discourse and in American academic discourse. And this says that it is an ontic condition. Everyone who enters internet is vulnerable because the online companies are so powerful. Because the information, once posted online, can stay there forever. Now, I will now proceed to introduce the internet balancing formula. And Professor Yakodaido graciously told I have 1 hour, so I will finish at 6:30. So I still have about 40 minutes. The internet balancing formula is supposed to be a living instrument, which means it has sufficient degree of flexibility to respond to future changes. It is a mathematical formula that should not enable the blocking of information, which is vital for the nation's well-being. It is inspired by Professor Alexi's mathematical tool. We know that mathematical approach to conflicting rights is used. By the way, German courts use Alexi's weight formula in their judgments. I have verified that many times. Some German courts write into their decision, this is the weight formula, we apply it. And the input elements are based on the criteria used by international courts, especially the European Court of Human Rights. The internet balancing formula should also allow application by anyone, not requiring professional legal training. And now, it is a coordinate value of 2 fundamental rights. Numerical value assigned as a result of input elements to right to privacy, divided by numerical value assigned as a result of input elements to freedom of expression. I will show what it really means. For significant input elements, we have divided the level of interference into 3: light, moderate, and intense interference. And the final assumption, because hate speech nowadays, and I think justifiably so, is prohibited in absolute terms, internet balancing formula becomes applicable once it is established that hate speech is excluded. So if somebody really engages in hate speech online, accuses a vulnerable group, or calls for violence, in our view, there is nothing to balance. The information should be blocked or should be deleted. Now we enter the right to privacy side. And according to my initial approach, using the aspect of internet vulnerability, everybody is vulnerable when entering internet. We have assigned numerical value 1 to the first element on the side of right to privacy. The second element is interference into right to privacy. And we would say that if there is a light interference, it would be numerical value 1. If it is moderate, it would be 2. If it's intense, it would be 3. And we identify the privacy with PR and the intensity by small letter x. So far, the side of right to privacy is V, which is a constant. It is always 1, plus PRX. It can be 1 to 3. 1, 2, or 3. The third element is time. Because we know that with the passage of time, interference into privacy will diminish. What somebody considers a very strong interference into one's private life today or tomorrow may not be the same in 10 years. Yes? If somebody posts a video of a party, young students after exams, very merrily drinking beer, maybe tomorrow it's not good, but in 10 years it's not significant. It's diminishing. It is a matter of degree. We have thought it is not so intense, so we represent it on the scale 1 to 0 with a small letter 1. And it is arbitrary. How many years have passed? We have assigned 0 if it is less than 3 years, and 1 if it is more than 13 years. And so far, the right to privacy is this. V plus PR plus T. Now, freedom of expression side. The first element is public interest in the subject matter. We consider this as an objective, not a subjective criterion. PI, public interest, 3 levels. Minor public interest, 1. Maybe local community level. Medium public interest, interest for larger communities. And significant public interest, number 3. Level of interest 0 if it is a matter of public curiosity. I have asked, is this rational? In my article, there will be a lot of discussion about that. But I think that most of the people, when asked, when confronted with a question, how significant a matter is for public interest, would reach statistically the same outcome. The majority of us would say that the fact that I was late today here is a minor public interest. If Japanese Prime Minister was late to this meeting, it would be of major public interest. Yes, we all would agree on that. So, the second element concerns the matter of public figure. PIF, public figure significance on level 3. And again, number 3, a person holding significant public power. Number 2, who has voluntarily entered public domain. And number 1, person who is involuntarily in the public domain. Who is involuntarily in the public domain? For example, the wife of a famous politician. When he married the politician, she didn't know that her husband one day will be a public figure. So far, the side of the freedom of expression is this, PI plus PX. The third element is how information was obtained. OI, less important input, and it has a negative value. So if information was obtained illegally, it would be minus 0.75. If it was obtained morally acceptable, in acceptable way, yet legal, it's minus 0.5. And if it is obtained in morally questionable way, it would be minus 0.25. And of course, we understand that the division, which is morally questionable or not, may change over time. So far, the side of freedom of expression is this. Now, here is now an additional aspect, the aspect of empathy. Because, in my view, all of the matters described above, in principle, can be decided by artificial or human intelligence. If to write an algorithm can detect if somebody is a public figure, if something is of importance for the public. In order to sustain moral element in the assessment, we would need to make certain that artificial intelligence does not have the exclusive ability to evaluate content online. That's why I have introduced the elements of empathy where only a human mind, a person, is capable of assessing what is the level of empathy. And it is the combination of 1 for both sides. Yes. Matter Z, 0.25 to 1. It is not compulsory, applied when the quotient is 1 or situation calls for that. And now here is the internet balancing formula, which was before Robert Alexi's critique. We see here, above there, is the side of the right to privacy. Below is the side of freedom of expression. If here was a screen, I could write the weight formula of Robert Alexi here, which is also quite complicated one. So that is the internet balancing formula as it stood before the academic discussion with Alexi started. Now there is the matter of the interest in historic truth. I indicated initially that the internet balancing formula would be applied once it has been made certain that hate speech is excluded. At the same time, from the other end, in my view, the balancing should not lead to a blocking of historic truth. So, if it can be shown that it concerns historic truth, the information has to be accessible regardless what the IBF will test. I will skip this testing because it will be in my article, and I will now go to Robert Alexi's critique. But before that, an example of the interest in historical truth. Because I still have 32 minutes, so I can devote a bit time on that. What would be an example? Estonian history. In 1992, when Soviet Union was still in existence, there was a military coup attempt in Moscow. You may remember that. Gorbachev was overthrown after that coup, Yeltsin came to power, and Soviet Union was dissolved. In 1992, during the coup, Estonia was also able to declare or redeclare its independence, restore its independence. At the time when the coup was going on, the attempted coup was going on, it was believed that Moscow will send additional troops to Estonia, the tanks were on its way, and there was also an individual named who would become the new leader of the country. This name, until today, is not known. It is believed that some people yet living in Estonia know who that person was supposed to be. Now, how to put that into the context of historical truth? Suppose that the man who was the president of Estonia at that time is asked in an interview. He's still living, he's 85 years old, so maybe he will give an interview towards the end of his life and will tell to the online news portal reporter the name of the person who was supposed to become the leader if the coup had been successful. And now we need to apply the internet balancing formula. This person who was supposed to become the new leader, let's suppose he is not known at all, no public figure, too much time has elapsed, so the balancing formula would tell us we should not reveal his name. But it is a matter of historical truth. So, now. Robert Alexi's critique, which will also appear now in the European Law Journal. Alexi, in his article, contrasts his weight formula and internet balancing formula. He says that his weight formula is abstract and general, and internet balancing formula is concrete and practical. He also questions the matter of internet vulnerability. He asks if this is the intensity element or the one of abstract weight of privacy. And I will elaborate more on that when I give my reply. He also advances the so-called concretization thesis, because he said that the input elements of the internet balancing formula are located at the level below the weight formula. It is more concrete. Yes, input is already if it is a public figure, if it is the element of time, and so on. And he also considers the element of empathy as the weakest element of the internet balancing formula. Now, his criticism, as I showed, of the internet vulnerability. And here is an interesting, I think, a broader, interesting theoretical question. What Alexei writes is that abstract weight can only be attributed to the right to privacy as such. If it were to be attributed to the right to privacy under certain conditions, like the communication on the internet, it would not any longer concern the abstract weight. Rather, it would concern the weight under certain conditions. Now, and here is a discussion ongoing now between Alexei and myself. The question is, can at any given time exist more than one abstract weight of a fundamental right? Because from offline world we know that the right to privacy and freedom of expression, for example, or freedom of religion, have the same abstract weight. Can we say that at a given time, in certain situations, the abstract weight of right to privacy is different? Alexei says, no, abstract weight of one fundamental right, general fundamental right, like right to privacy, always is the same. My reply would be different, opposite, that there can be more than one abstract weight at a given time. I have three reasons. The source of abstract weight for Alexei may be from ideal dimension of law. For me, it would be from discursive practice. What and how the courts and stakeholders, how they assign different abstract weight to certain fundamental right. For example, it can be that Facebook assigns different abstract weight, lower abstract weight to right to privacy than YouTube, for example. Secondly, it is the interrelation between abstract weight and intensity. Here is an interesting point. In my view, consistent intensity of certain level may transform into abstract weight. So if through discursive practice, certain online stakeholder consistently prioritizes freedom of expression over right to privacy, it may mean that in those platforms, the abstract weights correspondingly change. And third reason, it is related to one of our areas of scientific research. It has to do with human rights development. In other words, new human rights are derived or implied from existing rights, and we can see that if we say that right to privacy is a relative right, it is relative on the same level as freedom of expression, yet it can be that within the right to privacy exist certain sub-rights which claim absolute protection. For example, the right to bodily integrity or the right not to know one's genetic heritage. We could say there are claims that these are absolute. They cannot be infringed under any circumstances. If I say I don't want to know whether I will get a heart attack in 10 years, but my genetic information would say I will, then the doctor should not tell me under any circumstances. So that is one aspect. Based on Alexis' criticism, the internet balancing formula has been revised. We see now two aspects. The first is the level of intensity of interference. Up there, IP is intensity of privacy interference, and second, intensity of expression for interference. The elements remain the same. PRTE, PI, PFOI, and the what you saw initially. But then I have added the abstract weight of privacy or expression. As you see, internet vulnerability has been eliminated. And now, based on whether the abstract weight of privacy or expression, freedom of expression is higher, the outcome will be different. The value of the abstract weight can be on the scale 0 to 2. 2 stands for an absolute weight. In other instances, the 1 to 0 signifies which right deserves more protection. And I can tell you from the academic discourse which I see or we see around the world, we see input or formulations which say, sometimes they say that in online digital environment, freedom of expression needs more protection. And others say right to privacy deserves more protection. So that is a deserving more protection aspect. Now, the second criticism of Alexis was concerning the concretization thesis. He calls it, he says that the input elements are below the concreteness of weight formula. My reply is, yes, it is so. And the concretization thesis accomplishes what argumentation thesis does in the weight formula. Now, what do I mean by that? The concretization thesis, justifies the classification of input elements. It minimizes arbitrariness concern and increases the claim to correctness. So it can be concrete. And now this is what Alexis writes about empathy. He says it is a weak position of empathy because we cannot say that empathy is the only aspect where moral evaluation enters the internet balancing formula. He says that moral evaluation is inseparable from rational evaluation. In my view, the aspects of rational argumentation and moral evaluation are not synonyms. Moral evaluation does not suppose justification via arguments. In other words, we simply know if something is right or wrong. We do not need to justify it. That is moral argumentation. So, I have proposed, in reply to Alexis' criticism, the so-called irrationality thesis, which says that irrational element of empathy, we do not know why we say that we should increase a bit the protection of freedom of expression or right to privacy is sometimes necessary. It can be applied in stalemate cases, and it can be applied in difficult cases. Now, this internet balancing formula, it could influence balancing in the internet. It could raise confidence in private online balancing as a rational instrument. And it could decrease objections of lack of transparency, of arbitrariness. And they provide a tool to claim correctness. Now, I would, these are all the slides, but since I still have some time, I was doing very quickly, I would like to add a few aspects. In my view, the big internet companies are not very interested to open their kitchen side to the academics and to the public. They are guarding their secrets, how they evaluate content online. We have several research networks where I'm involved, and we do not, despite our requests to get information from Google or Yahoo or Facebook, we do not get the information. Jokingly, I believe one day will appear a whistleblower, like Edward Snowden appeared regarding surveillance. A whistleblower will appear from Facebook or Google and say, our standard is that we have no standards. We just arbitrarily evaluate that. But on the other hand, I think that such kind of mathematical approach would, if applied, in principle, would be able indeed to accomplish that people have some more confidence when they enter the digital domain. Perhaps not even so much it could be used by the big companies because they all have their own algorithms, but it could also be used by medium, small companies, bloggers, private bloggers who need to protect themselves for, let's say, accusations that they do not correctly balance conflicting information. So, we do believe that once these articles appear in the European Law Journal, there will be subsequent academic debate related to that. And of course, I want to thank you for staying, and if there is an academic discussion or if there are questions, I am at your disposal. Thank you very much.
もう少し時間がありますので、2つか3つぐらい質疑したいと思います。日本語でも小谷先生が翻訳していただけるので結構ですので、何か質問ある方は積極的にお願いしたいと思いますが、いかがでしょうか。
Thank you very much for your lecture. My name is Junko Kotani. I'm a professor at Shizuoka University, and I've been studying the hate speech regulation both in Japan and the US. And my question, but it's a very, very basic question, but you say that it'll be easy to assess all the information using the AI or other technology, but I still do not really agree with you, or I still do not know how you can tell the difference between the, well, if, for instance, in the case of hate speech, if someone said the Japanese people in general are inferior to the white race, so therefore they should be, the Japanese should be murdered. Let's murder them all. That'll be very easy to be assessed as hate speech. But most of the hate speech does not take that like apparent form. And how does anything can evaluate or assess most of the information on the internet?
Yes. Thank you for this question. I would like to a bit elaborate on this topic. Of course, the example which you gave it's very clear. There is no question about that. I think the difficult cases are where it is not clear if we are dealing with hate speech or if we are not dealing with hate speech. Yes. Well, since you entered the topic of historical facts, it is in Europe, it is a very delicate and difficult situation. You may know that in some European countries, for example in Germany, legislation has been adopted which criminalizes denial of certain facts from the past. For example, if in Germany somebody is to deny Holocaust, the person risks imprisonment. But it is easy to detect denial of Holocaust. But you gave the example of Japan, I would give the example of Estonia. If somebody in Estonia says, we hate Russians and all Russians should be thrown out of Estonia, it's clearly hate speech. But if somebody is to say, Russian students are not doing so good at school, their performance record is objectively taken lower than that of Estonians, is that hate speech? Or is that, let's say, a very critical expression of certain views, which is on the border of hate speech? When I say that artificial intelligence is evaluating the content online, it is based on my direct discussions with people who work in big online companies. For example, in our recent conference in Tallinn University, we had a very high-ranking official of Google who is representing Google by the European Commission. And he openly, I asked him at the conference, he said, how many % of the decisions taken by Google, whether to block or delete data, is taken by humans and what percentage is taken by artificial intelligence? He said 95% is taken by artificial intelligence. 95%. There have been some tests which I have been reading, for example Facebook, regarding Facebook. If somebody is posting on Facebook information, let's say attacking vulnerable groups, let's say maybe same-gender people or certain ethnic minorities, and putting out, let's say, controversial information and opinions, then advocacy groups have techniques how to report this and how to attack, and the artificial intelligence of Facebook catches it and closes the account. It takes several weeks to get it back, because in order to reach a human person who starts then to look into that information. So what I'm saying is, right now, artificial intelligence very clearly is evaluating online content. Now, how do they do it? Quite recently, the big online companies have started to publish their so-called community standards. If you go into the homepage of Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, you would see that they have the so-called community standards which say we support this and this and we are against this and this, rather general community standards. And on the basis of those standards, they say they evaluate the content. But how it is really done, we do not know. We could call this, let's say, the black box phenomenon. We don't know who evaluates it and how it is being evaluated. My own opinion is this. Online companies take fighting hate speech more and more seriously. They take it seriously. They would like to take hate speech down. I do believe that sometimes they are overreacting. They are taking down more information than should be taken down. Yet at the same time, I think there is already evidence that big online companies are partners of governments in fight against cyber crimes and fight against terrorism. We know that big online companies give information to governments related to electronic communication. And governments use that information for heightened security, international and national security. And that's why I believe the governments at the moment are not very pushy to make certain that online companies take seriously their obligations regarding content which is legal. In Germany, there was recently adopted a law which came into effect last year. This law requires all online companies to take down hate speech within 24 hours. If it is a more complicated matter, within 1 week. And the concern, of course, in Germany is that it will lead to overreaction, that online companies do not want to risk that they break the law. Because if they do not take down hate speech within 24 hours, there can be sanctions against the online companies. So rather than discussing or evaluating whether it is hate speech or not, they take it down. That's I believe, is the way how it is developing at the moment. How the artificial intelligence evaluates the online content, this I do not know. I do believe that most of the companies have their own algorithms. And these algorithms can be changed. If you want the whole, or let's say, the door to be more open or the door to be more closed, they can do it rather easily. Yes? So in that context, this IBF, or the Internet Balancing Formula, the concept which we have been working on, if it were to be applied, it would provide more information to individuals who use respective websites. They could understand why certain information has been deleted or not. It has been, or it hasn't been deleted. But since you mentioned hate speech, I do believe that the matter of hate speech it's a universal problem. I'm sure it's a problem in Japan, it's a problem in Korea, in Australia, United States. It is the same problem. What I see in Europe is now regarding hate speech, both online and offline, is a trend towards criminalizing hate speech. Maybe 20 years ago, it was mainly civil liability. Yes, but now it is more and more. Denial of Holocaust, denial of Armenian genocide. In some Central European countries, the former socialist countries, there are discussions whether to criminalize public display of communist and Nazi flags and symbols. So it is becoming more and more criminalizing it. And of course here you ask the question, where do you stop? Yes. Today you criminalize this, tomorrow you criminalize maybe assault against minorities, so where does it stop? It's not clear.
Can I ask one more question? In regard to the online contents, there is actually no national border, and as you know, that the US does not criminalize or illegalize hate speech, and nor does Japan or Korea. Japan, Korea, and the US, these are the three countries that do not have the hate speech criminalization legislation. So in those countries, your formula, I mean, if the Facebook, are you talking about the Facebook blocking all the hate speech using your formula for all the users in all the nations, or are we talking about just Google search results or Facebook timeline information in each, like one particular countries where they log on from or where the user registered themselves, as in, I don't really.
As I indicated, when I started to introduce the formula, the assumption is that this formula is not applicable when we deal with hate speech. Because with hate speech, you cannot balance. You cannot say that, well, I don't know, somebody denies Holocaust, but at the same time, this person also speaks about something which is very important, so we balance, maybe it is okay to deny Holocaust in Germany. No. If it is considered to be hate speech, there is no balancing. So it would become applicable when we deal with legal non-hate speech content. For me to criticize, let's say, if I write a blog and I criticize Estonian Prime Minister, I have the right to do that. If I criticize Estonian Prime Minister as a father, I also have the right to do that, but the Estonian Prime Minister has the right that he is not criticized as a father in a private capacity. So this is all legal content, but the internet balancing formula would then provide an output or a decision whether to allow my content, my mailing, or my information, opinion, or not. So hate speech would not be, or hate speech would be excluded when we speak about the internet balancing formula.
他にも質問あると思いますけれども、ちょっと時間が参りましたので、とりあえずこれで終わりたいと思います。どうも、松先生ありがとうございました。Thank you very much. We have to finish this lecture because the time is running. So let's talk about your theme over drink at the reception party. Thank you very much.